Hi, welcome. My name is Rob Schware. I'm the Executive Director of the Give Back Yoga Foundation and here on Give Back Yoga University to do one of our monthly free classes for people who are interested in meeting a leader in the yoga service movement who's really sort of stood out and captured many people's imagination by the work that they're doing and who they have become through yoga service work. And I couldn't be more thrilled to have Kamala Barrio join us today. She's a self-described radical self-love coach, a mindful communication trainer, a fierce and compassionate advocate for love. She was a public policy lawyer for 13 years in San Francisco. She left her legal career and founded her own company, Attuned Living, which is a mindfulness and wellness organization at the intersection of love and social justice. Some big terms here. We're going to unpack some of those things and just have a conversation that will end up getting us to the point of how 100% BIPOC teacher training program has evolved and will be delivered in the coming summer. So welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you, Rob.
Yeah. Tell us, I do this with everyone, so you're no exception here, but share with us, or trace your roots, as a human being on planet Earth, and also as a yoga teacher. I think everyone's story is really interesting. I mean, how you became a yoga teacher, and who are you?
Beautiful. Well, I am a child of Panamanian Spanish-speaking immigrants. I grew up in Southern California, and my parents were, of course, tremendously influential in my life. My Panamanian culture is a big part of who I am, who I see myself as. As for yoga, I was introduced to yoga as a child by my mother. She took me to my very first yoga class. I went to a mom-child yoga class when I was very young, and they were people who were really heart-centered, my parents. So yoga was part of my life. Guided meditations were part of my life. I didn't know that that's what they were called as a child, but they were there. So I guess my roots of my personal roots and my yoga roots are really intertwined. I was born in New York. We moved to California when I was pretty young. So I never really thought much about those yoga classes. I never thought much about yoga again, actually, until I became an adult. And I discovered yoga, or I thought I discovered yoga, not remembering my yogic history. I thought I discovered yoga about 20 years ago. And that was at the Integral Yoga Institute. And that was it. I found my calling. I had been a lawyer for 13 years prior to that, feeling a lot of stress in that profession, was really looking for something to help me relieve that stress. And it did that and so much more. I ended up quitting the law and becoming a yoga teacher, a yoga therapist, and ultimately a yoga teacher trainer, which is what I do now.
You said you found your calling, but was that a find, like you are walking along a path and you see a nice rock that you want to pick up and it's a discrete event, or tell me what you meant by how did you find it? Some people wake up and they know this is what I want to do, and others unveil a process of getting to it.
Yeah. I don't usually say I find my calling. I'm not sure what moved to those words in this moment, but for me, it was really more of a process, and it's a process that's still ongoing. So I knew very young I wanted to be a lawyer, and people always told me, you'll make a great lawyer. I think because I was an argumentative kid and I liked battling wits with my teachers. And so I think, you know, I got that message very early on. And so I always thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. And I did it, and I was good at it. And I excelled, and my career was going well. And then when I discovered yoga, really, I thought of it as a way to just manage the stress. You know, it's a stressful job, stressful career. And what I think I found really were these other layers in myself that I had lost touch with. I think what I found was that those invitations that my parents had, those seeds my parents had planted in me so long ago, inviting me to go deeper and look deeper. And find is not exactly right. Maybe rediscover, reawaken that part of myself. And it was so powerful and so beautiful. And I was called to go deeper and to explore more and to see, I took a few yoga classes, and I was like, there's something here. And I wanted to know what that was. And I dedicated a lot more of my time and energy to doing that than I initially thought when I first started yoga, which I thought was, I'll take a class once a week and I'll feel much better.
There's something here. I've discovered that so often. I myself too, that after you experience yoga, you feel a greater connection to self, to Mother Earth, or to the Sangha of your community. Is that the sort of thing that was unveiling itself for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I would say, to self. I was so focused on in my head. I was very I'm still very logical, very practical, definitely very grounded. But there was something, and the best I can say, or the simplest I can say, is there was something heart focused that I hadn't been living in. There was something in my heart that I hadn't been living in, that I knew was there because of my own childhood, but that I had, neglected or forgotten. And so it was an opportunity to drop down into that space. And it was a coming home of sorts for me, both coming home to myself, but also coming home to these roots, these seeds that had been planted so long ago.
By your mother.
Yeah.
In all honesty, this isn't our first interview.
That's right.
We've done this back in 2014 when we did our Huffington Post interview together. And at that point, you were teaching at the St. Vincent de Paul Wellness Center. How'd you come across that? Why? And describe, let's go back to that interview.
Yeah, that was some time ago. I think 6-7 years ago, we had that interview. I was at the St. Vincent de Paul Wellness Center. I discovered it through the executive director of the Wellness Center, who was looking for volunteers to teach wellness practices. I was not a yoga teacher yet. So I was teaching other wellness practices that I was familiar with, trauma healing related, body-centered practices. And I think I was in my yoga teacher training though. So I was on my way, but I wasn't teaching yoga yet because I wasn't a yoga teacher. And then within 6 months, I was teaching yoga and absolutely loved it. Loved the population, loved the experience. I loved everything about it. And then after probably about 6 years, I think it was 5 or 6 years, the wellness center closed. And it was so sad because it was such an amazing resource for the community. And we all knew that. And we all knew that we were doing something really important and really special. And within 1 month, the director of programming there had created a new nonprofit organization and continued doing the work. And I continued teaching with her. So here we are. So many years later, and I'm still doing that work. I'm still doing it, still inspired every week.
You mentioned the population. What is the population?
The population that both the Wellness Center and this new organization called the Healing Well in San Francisco serve are underhoused adults who are also living with addiction, mental health issues, and also living under the trauma, for many of them, of racial and social injustice.
So, Sorry, I remember that interview, and I remember there was some pretty interesting standout moments that you had that helped you refocus and understand exactly the nature of the service work you were doing. Do you remember any of those?
I do. I remember, I mean, and these stories keep coming, right? You know, I remember back then I had someone sit in my class. I don't even remember. I remember I told you a story about someone sitting in my class. They didn't do anything. And
That's the one I
and I
remember too.
yeah, they sat in a chair. They didn't do follow any of my instruction. And you know, that's fine. I thought they were unengaged, not interested. Sometimes back then in particular, folks would come into the program, into my yoga class from programs they were in. And they weren't necessarily interested in yoga. They were just interested in kind of having this field trip out of their own spaces that they were in, often in recovery centers. And so I thought, well, they're just happy to have a break from, you know, their regular day to day. So, you know, I didn't think anything of it. And then at the end of class, they came to me and told me, they thanked me profusely and told me they got so much out of it. So it was just such a wake-up call for me as a pretty new yoga teacher. You know, you never know, right? You never know what people are taking away from what you're doing. So just do what you do it heartfully, do it mindfully and intentionally, and there will be a benefit. There will be a benefit. Whether they know it or not, I'll even say.
Well, what was going through your mind when you were doing the class and that person was just sitting there reading? Were your judgmental mind saying, you know, WTF, come on, I mean, why aren't you participating, or what am I doing here?
Yeah, I think went more in my judgmental mind. I think more went onto myself. Like I thought, oh, am I not a good enough yoga teacher? If I were a better yoga teacher, would they put down their book and join in? You know, there was a part of me, I think, that was really went in that direction. And I just, you know, if there's anything I took away from my yoga teacher training, it was just to, like, in terms of teaching, you know, just like the mechanics of teaching, just trust the process, just trust the process. And I did, you know, I noticed the thoughts. I had the thoughts. I noticed the thoughts. I said, okay, thank you very much. And let's keep going.
For a lot of people, it's scary to show up in those kinds of situations, and especially with the population that you're working with. How do you overcome this I'm not good enough?
Yeah, I don't think of it as overcoming it. I think of befriending it. You know, it's there not to hurt me. It's actually, that voice is there to help me. It's trying to help me. And it's helping me in ways that I find now with more experience, maybe not as skilled, ways that are coming from a really small place within me that's still there, that still needs healing. And so I just try to hold that voice with compassion. I don't try to overcome it or push it away, but how can I be with it in love and compassion?
And there was another story of, I remember this so well, a man who was bent over at a 45-degree angle because of his back. Remember that story?
Yes. I remember him well.
He was totally bent over 45
Yeah.
degrees.
Yeah.
And he still came out saying that he benefited from the practice.
Yeah. Yeah, that was beautiful to see, and to be beautiful to watch his progress, because he came back several times. And when you're experiencing that much injury, and he was in a lot of pain, I didn't know what would one class a week do. How much could I help him? But I offered him everything I had. And we talked, we talked after class, and I told him what we were doing in class and why we were doing it. And I saw this really noticeable improvement in a really pretty short period of time, certainly less than I would have expected. And I remember he said to me, I've been doing this on my own. I've been doing this at home. And I was just to hear that, I was so touched to know he wasn't just coming into class, but he really took in what I said and was using it on his own time. to really help his own healing. And it was beautiful, beautiful to watch.
Yeah, those two stories really, stuck out for me at least. Oh my God! So 2014 till now, have you been offering regular classes with the Healing Well? That's what it's called, the Healing Well.
Yes, I've been offering regular classes at the Healing Well. I took a small break to have a baby, and I took a small break during the pandemic. During the pandemic, we paused classes for a while, but then we have resumed. Everyone at the Healing Well, all the volunteers had the opportunity to be vaccinated pretty early on because we were seen as community health workers by the city of San Francisco for the work that we were doing. And then we were able to continue classes where they're outdoors now and they're masked. So it looks a little different, but still out there, still serving the community, and the Healing Well is doing everything else that they're doing as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, and not just because of COVID, but everything else from 2014 till now has been pretty drastic. I mean, in terms of the societal changes, the list could fill an arm with all of the stats as well. And we've all been living through it. Do you ever feel despair in what you're doing? And if so, how do you keep I'm curious, how does someone like you keep showing up?
Yeah. For me, certainly there have been so many things that have happened since 2014. Like you said, the list can, run the length of an arm, several arms probably.
Yeah.
But what I am seeing is that despite all those changes, or not changes, that's the precisely wrong word. These events, all of these events that have occurred, aren't indications, I don't think, that the country or this society has fundamentally changed. Certainly these events have woken a lot of people up who maybe weren't so aware of some of the social and economic and racial injustice in our society, but I wouldn't characterize them as, as at the core as changes. They're more revelations, I would say, in a lot of ways. So I wouldn't characterize this as a time of despair. It's just another day of continuing to do the work for me. And the way I keep going is with my practice. My yoga practice keeps me present, right? Because I can despair about, we're not moving quickly enough. Things aren't changing quickly enough. If we continue this way, what is it going to look like? And I just have to come back to this moment and come back to this breath even, and that helps me stay grounded. That helps me stay, with this student who's right in front of me, who's bent over at a 45-degree angle, or this student right in front of me who's telling me the pranayama or the breathing practices I taught her helped her quit smoking, right? Or this student right in front of me who's telling me, how do I deal with this infection I have in my foot, and I can't see a doctor for another week. It's just like what's right in front of me. That's all I can do. That's all I can do. Wow.
I need to start practicing with you. I do feel that despair. I mean, I see just the suffering of so many people. But I think you're right, and keep coming back to the breath, coming back to the one person. You reminded me of the tagline for the Give Back Yoga Foundation, actually, when we started it, which was to support certified yoga teachers of all traditions, to bring this work to unserved populations, one person, one breath at a time.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is, may I generalize that? Sometimes we sort of get caught up in a bigger story, and in the numbers and the magnitude of things that happen. But the work of a yoga teacher really is this one person, one breath at a time. That's where change happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I do find that. And for me too, I don't want to say that that I ignore or don't notice the larger context, because I absolutely do, right? I understand that I am teaching in this society, and I am aware. Like, I don't believe that it's about, when I say that one breath, one person at a time, I don't mean to suggest that I ignore all that or that we should ignore all that. But that's what helps me have the capacity to come back to remember that as well. So holding both, right? Both hands.
Yep.
And also, not to say I don't have moments of sadness and despair and joy and celebration. All that's there, right? But can I be with it in this breath, whatever it may be?
But that wider context involves judgments and stereotypes. You're a person of color. You've obviously had to deal with that in your yoga career. How's that manifested?
Yeah. Oh, that's a big one. I guess I could talk about what's happening mostly for me right now. I'm actively working to create yoga spaces for Black folks and for people of color. And I'll have people tell me that doing that, creating these safe spaces or these courageous spaces, is just as bad as the systemic institutionalized violence faced by Black, Indigenous people of color in this country for the last several hundred years. And so those kinds of conversations are things that I find that I contend with. And of course, there's no comparison. Trying to remedy a wound and perpetuating a wound they're not the same thing.
Right.
So that's certainly one that I've had to address over the years of being a yoga teacher. And I would say, especially now, creating this BIPOC yoga teacher training that we're going to talk a little bit about in a bit. So that's really a big one. That's a really big one.
And how does that live? Does that live in your body? Because I think speaking for myself, we can get very much caught up in our minds with statistics and strategies and thinking about how to solve certain problems. But I know trauma lives in our bodies. It's at the cellular level. And so does that apply to you? And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I've been studying for a very long time, since before I became a yoga teacher. Just the existence of trauma in the body. There's so many wonderful books out, and I wish I'd come prepared to list them, because I know I'll forget a lot of them. But The Body Keeps Score is one that I'm familiar with that I really, really appreciate.
Bessel van der Kolk.
But yeah, yes, absolutely. Which his work inspired just a big piece of my yoga training experience when I did get into yoga. When I did get into becoming a yoga teacher, I should say back in 2010, I was really inspired about bringing yoga practices that were trauma informed and trauma aware, because yes, trauma does live in the body. And I'm, as a person of color, I experienced trauma and racism. Racism is a trauma. There's so many studies that talk about the trauma of racism, the stress of living in a racist society. Dr. Gail Parker has a beautiful book, Restorative Yoga for Ethnic and Race-Based Stress and Trauma. And for me, yoga is a healing path for me personally. When I think about how trauma lives in my body, or how racism lives in my body or shows up in my body, I kind of need to get grounded into like a specific event, right? Because it's like these events in that you experience through life. This is how I experience racism anyways. It's like these individual events throughout life, as well as kind of this like fog almost that you're just walking through. But then there are these events that happen as well, right? One story I sometimes tell is I was confronted, last year, I think it was, I was confronted by a white man who I'd never seen before, who just happened to be passing through my neighborhood, which is a predominantly white neighborhood, where I've lived now for almost 7 years. And he stopped me while I was enjoying the garden that I planted in my front yard. And he demanded to know what I was doing there in my front yard, you know? And so there are these moments, right, of being singled out as not belonging to my own community. And, you know, there are these body sensations that come up right in the moment, right? There's, you know, the shame and humiliation, you know, the red face and the sinking heart, you know, fear, you know, what if he doesn't believe me? What if he calls the police? If the police come, then what's going to happen, right? So this flood of adrenaline comes up. Body sensations associated with anger and, you know, righteous indignation, you know, clenched jaw, furrowed brow, tight fists, you know. And of course, that's just one moment, right? But over a lifetime of these moments, we know how unhealthy this is for the body, the long-term stress that this causes. So there's that as well, right? So what do? I practice. I practice my yoga as if my life depended on it, because it does. It really does.
I love that. I practice my yoga as if my life depended on it. That's brilliant. After that discrete event, did you go back to practice, or did you wait the next day? Or, I mean, that's a imprint. It's, as you said, these are continuous imprints that you have over time, and they must come stirring back up or affect you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was interesting that it happened while I was gardening, because one of my practices, whether it's technically yoga or not, but one of my practices is to come back to the earth. So I had my hands in that moment in dirt, you know, and so I was just like, you know, I am a part of this. I do belong, right? This, you know, earth is here and I am part of it. I'm part of nature. There's no difference. There's no distinction, you know, so I had that, and my breath, always back to the breath, back to the breath. So absolutely, I used my practice. Yes.
Wow. It's a powerful story. So going out to the general again, you know, in our society and in the yoga world right now, there's a lot of talk and good action to sort of try to have inclusivity, and diversity and equity take root, you know, in this, and it's been a hard thing to do in the yoga world. You just need to look at the covers of yoga magazines over the years to see how white and nimble bodies have been reflected there. What do you think are the programs and the collaborations, and what I'm not sure what it means to take root, but how would you approach that?
Yeah, I would say, you know, for folks who are noticing, right, that their yoga spaces are not diverse, not inclusive, and want to change that, I think the number one quality that they need to cultivate, if they want those to take root, I'm liking this metaphor, is to cultivate this willingness to be uncomfortable, right? Above all, a willingness to be uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to increase your awareness of how society's culture manifests in yoga spaces. That's very uncomfortable. And it's very uncomfortable to take active steps to change that, right? It's uncomfortable to push against what are the norms ultimately, you know, of society. It's, you know, it's uncomfortable to what I sometimes call to swim against the current, right? And so this willingness to be uncomfortable, I think, is at the root of it.
A couple summers ago, I was invited to the Navajo Indian Reservation for a trauma, yoga, and social justice week, which had about 28 people from Native reservations and people of color, and 2 men, one a 28-year-old and myself. So a whole week, you can imagine we were talking about, you know, patriarchy and intergenerational trauma and white supremacy. And here I am sitting in the middle of all this, and I was squirming and feeling so uncomfortable that entire week. But I think the point that you're making is that unless yoga studios, you know, sort of put themselves out there and, you know, are willing to get uncomfortable with this, then nothing's going to change. It's not going to take root. That, you know, roots sort of take a while to get established, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think oftentimes people feel like, well, at least I'm not making things worse, right? They put their heads down. They're like, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to stay comfortable, but at least I'm not making things worse. I'm not out there attacking people or telling people they shouldn't be gardening in their own front yards. But the fact is that systemic institutionalized racism, what it needs to survive in all spaces, including yoga spaces, what's absolutely core to its survival is for people to just keep their heads down and not cause any trouble, right? Because that's precisely what holds it in place, right? That learning that you did at that workshop, it was uncomfortable, right? But you learned something. I trust you learned something new, right? And so now you're a different person because you were willing to sit in that discomfort. And that's what we all need to be doing.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. Okay, so let's get to the end point here. What's what are you offering, and how did it come about? I'm excited about it, and tell us more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so excited about it as well. So this is a BIPOC yoga teacher training. It's for BIPOC students led by BIPOC leadership. It's 100% scholarship based. So while we did, we priced it at half the price of the usual integral yoga teacher training program. So at $1,080 is the price. However, we're offering everyone whatever level of scholarship they need to make it possible to attend. Everybody. So it is hosted by the Integral Yoga Institute of San Francisco. That's right, of San Francisco. And it started for me, the seed was planted by 3 prenatal yoga teachers here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Alex Rossi, Malila Smith, and Jane Austen. And these 3 prenatal yoga teachers recognized the devastating and really shameful Black and maternal and infant pregnancy-related mortality rates here in the United States. So they created a free prenatal yoga teacher training for Black folks and women of color to address this. So it's just prenatal yoga. And the intention is to bring the powerful benefits of prenatal yoga into all these communities that are really suffering. And there were something like 260 participants who enrolled in this program, including me. I had been wanting to take prenatal yoga teacher training for a while, and I thought, well, this is amazing. Let me try. And intellectually, it was amazing. I loved it. But then stepping into this Zoom call, right? And flipping, you see the 25 squares of the gallery, and just flipping screen after screen after screen of all these Black faces, these Black women, these people of color, who are all asking themselves the same questions. How can we change what we see, right? I mean, I talk about it now and I get emotional. It was so beautiful. It was such a powerful experience for me. And I've been through a lot of teacher trainings. It was just incredible. And then even the content, of course, right? Like every new mom, of course, probably has fears. That's going to be a natural topic, right? In any prenatal training, but the discourse is going to be so different, right? When that, for example, studies have shown that Black newborn babies here in the United States are 3 times more likely than white babies to die when looked after white doctors, but not if they're looked after Black doctors. Then there is no difference, right? So there's going to be a very different discourse when this is at the front of mind of everybody, not just the, the smattering of people who are aware of this and who are scared about that when they imagine maybe having to go to the hospital to have their baby, or teaching a classroom of people who are worried about that. So it was just, it was so beautiful. And I left that training and I said, I have to do this. What can I do? I can't teach prenatal yoga teachers to become prenatal, I can't teach folks to become prenatal yoga teachers, but what can I do? And I thought, well, I can teach people how to be yoga teachers. I can help lead a 200-hour yoga teacher training. I can't do it by myself, but I know who I can talk to. So I approached the Integral Yoga Institute, my home yoga community. And I wondered, what are they going to say to this suggestion? They've never done anything like this before. Not only do I just want it to be for people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color, but I also want everyone to be able to attend it. I don't care if they can't pay anything. I don't care if no one can pay $1. I want it to happen. And I thought, what are they going to say? I was very, very nervous. But I also knew I was going to do it one way or another. But I approached the director of the Integral Yoga Institute, Swami Ramananda, and I laid out my experience I laid out why I wanted to do it. And without a moment's hesitation, without a blink of an eye, he said, yes, let's do it. And I was just so thrilled. I couldn't be more thrilled. And so we got the ball rolling. I'll be co-leading the teacher training with Mark Morozumi, Mia Velez, Arturo Peel will be teaching anatomy and physiology. We have guest presenters lined up, including Dr. Gail Parker, Reggie Hubbard. The list goes on, and it's 100% BIPOC leadership and 100% BIPOC students. And we just all couldn't be more excited about this really new thing that we've created.
Congratulations to you for the fire in your belly. And to Swami for just seeing so quickly this is the right thing to do. That's the type of person he is. I know him well.
Yes.
When does it? How do you apply for this? Are applications still open?
Yeah, applications are still open. BIPOCyogateachers.org will forward you exactly to the website where you can apply. The deadline for application is May 15th. So we do have to, close the application deadline so we can get all the administrative things lined up in place before it actually starts, which is on June 1st. We're also having a free open house event on May 11th. That same URL, BIPOCyogateachers.org, will take you to information on that open house coming up. And at the open house, the 4 lead teachers will all be on there talking about the teacher training and also answering folks' questions. This will be the second one we've had. The first one was incredible. I've led several open houses for different teacher trainings, but just the questions that came up, asking us about what we'll be sharing, what we'll be teaching, we got ideas from that. So please come to the open house. We're really excited to make this teacher training program something really unique and special.
I can't wait to talk to you afterwards.
Oh, yes. I'll send pictures of those Zoom screens.
Let's see if there's any questions. Does anybody have any questions out there in question land? Doesn't seem to be. No questions.
Let's see. I see something dropped in the chat. Let's see. Oh, no questions.
I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the work you do, for an opportunity to know you and to see where this journey leads.
Thank you so much. It's fun to mark time through our interviews. So if we have another one in 7 years, we'll we'll see where we are then. A whole new world.
Hope I'm alive then.
Keep on your practice.
That's the message. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. What an honor to be here. Thank you so much, Rob.